The mystery of the second wound. The most important, and certainly the most neglected of all the characters in the great drama of Baker Street, is Murray. Without Murray, there would have been no Watson in those hallowed rooms in Baker Street, and without Watson, Holmes, as likely or not, would have passed unsung. Murray, the humble orderly of the Berkshire Regiment, snatched Assistant Sergeant J.H. Watson of the 5th Northumberland Fusiliers from the very hands of the murderous Gazis on the stricken fields of Maiwand. Dr. Watson later recorded that he was struck on the shoulder by a Giselle bullet which shattered the bone and grazed the subclavian artery. The steps from Maiwand to Baker Street have been skillfully and delightfully, one may add delicately, recorded by Dr. Watson himself. Mr. H.W. Bell, in his scholarly notes on Dr. Watson's wound, calls attention to the fact that in 1887 Dr. Watson speaks of himself as nursing his wounded leg, and adduces several other examples of Dr. Watson's discomfort from his wounded leg. In one of these examples, Watson described himself as a half-pay officer with a damaged tendo Achilles. Mr. Bell enumerates instances between 1882 and 1895 in which Watson walked briskly, ran, dashed, rushed, and hurried. He then proceeds, in what seems to be a non sequitur, in a statement that these passages are ample proof that Watson is wounded in the heel and the left shoulder. Would Watson's agility be proof that he was wounded in the heel? The passages quoted by Mr. Bell might seem to be proof that had Watson only had one wound, that wound was in the shoulder. But surely they contribute nothing to the solution of the mystery of the second wound, except perhaps to weigh a little against the wounded tendo Achilles theory. Mr. Bell, in a footnote, refers us to Miss Helen Simpson's most interesting and plausible suggestion that the second wound was inflicted by Watson himself when, as he told Miss Morson later, he fired a double-barrelled tiger cub at the musket which looked into his tent. Miss Simpson's suggestion is interesting, but rather whimsical and humorous than plausible. Indeed, I think it might be in all fairness be described as a suggestion both whimsical and delicate. At all events, it's one to be dismissed from any serious attempt to solve the mystery of the second wound. To return to Mr. Bell's study for the moment, Watson is a medical man who refers to his leg in one place, and in another to his tendo Achilles. Would a doctor refer to a wound in the tendo Achilles as a wound in the leg? Heel would be the word, one thinks. Watson sustained two wounds. Of that, there can be no doubt. He tells us exactly how he came by the first. The second he refers to vaguely, saying now that it's his leg, now it's his heel. Where was Dr. Watson's second wound? It did not prevent me from walking, he says, yet it handicapped him in walking. Dr. Watson was a man of considerable modesty. This fact stands out in all his writings. He constantly played down his own part in the drama of Baker Street so that his hero might be thrown into still higher relief. Citations here are needless. Open any of his works at any page and you will find examples of modesty. The commentator firmly believes that Dr. Watson felt that in admitting one wound suffered for his country's cause, he was making more than a sufficiently romantic figure of himself. He shrank from admitting a second wound because a hero twice wounded would have seemed too much. But other matters contributed to his reticence, as we shall see. Dr. Watson himself gives us a definite clue that leads us to the solution of the mystery of the second wound. Let's go back to Murray and Maiawand. I was struck on the shoulder by a Giselle bullet, which shattered the bone and grazed the subclavian artery. I should have fallen into the hands of the murderous Gazis if it hadn't been the courage shown by Murray, my orderly, who threw me across a pack horse and succeeded in bringing me safely to the British lines. Safely, that is, but for the second wound, of which Watson's modesty and delicacy forbade his mention. A man thrown across a pack horse presents a singularly enticing target. His head and arms hang down from one side of the pack horse, his legs dangle on the other. The hinterlands of the Assistant Surgeon Watson was the billet for the second Giselle bullet. It was there he sustained his second wound. It would seem, as suggested above, that one wound, a shoulder wound, would be mentioned with modesty, decorum, and self-respect. A wound in the Schütznerplatz might suggest that the gallant doctor was not exactly facing the foe, as a good soldier would. In any case, and this, one believes, counted even more heavily with Dr. Watson, the mention of such a wound would be indelicate. The case is clear. Watson's wound was a wound in the military sense. Had it been the result of an accident, as Miss Simpsons contends, he would have said so. From the moment the Giselle bullet entered his shoulder until he was received into the safety of the British lines, you only have the period of Watson's history as an army man in which it would have been possible for him to get that second wound. When you have eliminated all that is impossible, then whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. It is impossible that Watson could have sustained his second wound at any other time, in any other place, or any other position. The exact location of the wound is thus fairly well defined. Having thoughtlessly let slip the fact that he'd sustained a second wound, and because the wound did, on occasion, handicap him from walking, the modest Watson must have felt that a wound in the leg would be a plausible, if inexact, description of it. The end. I hope you enjoyed that. What's your thoughts on Watson's wound? Leave comments in the comments section. And for next time, bye bye.